Hello. One of the buzzwords we hear a lot these days is trauma informed. Is this program trauma informed? Is this trauma informed counselling? Yeah. So, what does that mean? It can mean many different things to different people. It's like, well, if we're enforcing it as a standard, then obviously there's got to be some sort of agreement. But I think basically it requires some understanding of trauma, and hopefully not just from an academic kind of understanding, but more from a lived experience viewpoint. And the thing is, like, when I get a phone call from somebody who's in distress, I can tell by the cadence and the pitch of their voice that they're in distress. And the other thing that I can look for as somebody I think is particularly, responding to a trauma memory is that they'll start to dissociate. And the symptoms of that are, it sounds a bit like they've got tech brain. When you're talking to somebody on the phone and they're like looking at something else and they're just like, yeah. But they're just giving it a lick and a promise, whatever you're saying. They're not entirely present with you. And that's usually the thing. They're either in the past or they're in the future, like worried about what's going to happen to them. If they're experiencing a trauma, a dissociative trauma-related memory or thought. And so Bessel van der Kolk, he talks about how trauma memories in The Body Keeps the Score, that they're more overlaid with, they're more real than normal memories because they're more overlaid with sensations, smells, sights, touches, screaming alarms, whatever, of what was happening. It brings you very much back to the situation. So I'd start any conversation like that where somebody's in crisis and they're acutely distressed by just grounding them, probably typically using something like the 5 senses grounding techniques of just like, oh, well, what can you hear? What can you feel? Can you feel the chair pushing up against you? Are you safe? What's going on? That sort of stuff. And focus on the breath. And once I've brought them back into the present with me and made them realize that they've never really left the present, then we can start talking. But I don't want to talk specifically, I don't want to talk about the trauma. The trauma is like, if they want to delve into it, or it seems particularly relevant to helping them have an understanding, it's like, well, maybe the way to dissociate is to be disconnected from your emotions. And you might have done that for all sorts of reasons, to suppress your authenticity in order to fit in that environment, or you're so scared you didn't know what to do, so you just, did the flight or fight or fawn thing. It was just an automatic response to that. So if there's possibility for a breakthrough, then I'll talk about it. But I'm not interested in the trauma for the sake of it being a juicy story. And I think that's one of the things that the traps that a lot of clinicians fall into. It's like, because we're so driven by story that we hear a story, we situate ourselves in our lives through stories. And so when we hear a story like that, we're like, oh. And then people used to say to me, they used to say, I'm sorry that happened to you. And I'm like, yeah, well, I'm sorry it happened to me as well, but it's not happening to me now. And I don't really want like a pity party about it. I just want it to stop affecting my life. And eventually, it did. So I hope that's useful.